Welcome back, champions, to the third and final installment of the narrative campaign of Freeblades, The Search for the Moon Scepter. We have found the pieces of the map. We have battled into the Undercity, and now finally we have found the Moon Scepter, and we need to protect it because it is a person, not an object.
Not an object.
So the scenario here at 250 gold is protect the princess?
Yes. Rescue the princess.
Rescue the princess.
And because you won scenario 2.
Yep.
You are the defender or the protector of the princess.
So we got there
I need
first.
to try and take her from you. So I need to liberate her from the
oppressors
of Herodel.
You think that Trezorites are probably you got a little PTSD from the Trezorite invasion.
Could be.
So like always, guys, like, comment, subscribe, throw down some comments in the bottom about what you'd like to see next. Different timelines, different factions, different battles. We are in it to win it, and we will do pretty much shill for whatever Freeblades content you guys would like to see. I'd love to get Rodger up here to play a couple more games sometime in the future. Thank you as always, and here comes the game.
Make it happen. All right, so scenario 3, 250 gold. Yeah. So you're going to see something really cool in the game now with the Corona in that they are the only faction that gets to use 2 casters.
Nice.
And in fact, when they reach 200 gold, they have to use 2 casters. So you're going to see an added model. We've got the 200 I was running. But then you're going to see the skirmisher follower come back, and then also a male caster, because in Corona they work in male-female pairs. So you have the Moon Priest is the new hero. The Moon Priestess is still my leader. 2 Black Spears, because they need to redeem themselves after the travesty of the last game.
They didn't run, though. They just died where they stood.
The Mizrakai, I'm going to have, again, the 2 Red Spears and the Red Archer. And then our friend the Skirmisher is back from our very first game.
You recovered.
He is clearly the crux of our victory.
Okay.
So we have him back to pester you again.
Okay. And then for the 250 gold of the Herodel Questers, I only have the one ally in the Valkaran pikeman. The sergeant, he's got to hold everybody together. Right. Someone's got to be responsible for this ragtag bunch.
Somebody's got to be responsible for those crazy nights.
The leader definitely isn't. I've got the Fist of Vidnar as my caster, the High Quester Valia as my leader. I've got Apprentice Knight of Barrack, Apprentice Knight of Tanar, and a Questing Knight of Tanar as my heroes with the Stalker. That's my hero core. The follower core, I got a Buster Thresher, a Militia Spearman, 2 Muster Archers, and a Phalar Swordsman. So just a little bit of staying power and additional quest to Tanar. 1 more Muster Archer because, heck, I've got 8 points left over. Might as well give a guy a potato.
Right.
And then a Phalar Swordsman. No veteran upgrades. Just stock as he comes. Maybe holds a corner for a second.
All right.
We'll see how it goes.
We'll see what he's got.
Scenario 3. The Moon Scepter is a person.
Yes. To everyone's surprise, rather than artifact, it was a person that had been imprisoned by Trezorites.
Yeah.
And then needed liberated.
Or maybe potentially liberated from their mortal coil. We'll see.
Yes, we'll see.
So what's different about this scenario?
This scenario is a little kind of a fun one. So Freeblades has what's called standard scenarios, which are really more tournament-oriented type scenarios, really, really well balanced. And then they have what are called club scenarios, which can be fun to play, but they don't necessarily work great in a tournament setting because certain factions might be at a slight disadvantage or something of that sort. So this is a club scenario. The name of the scenario is Rescue the Prisoner, Rescue the Princess, but the model in the middle of the board is the prisoner. And you play the defender in this scenario. So you start, and there's essentially a 12-inch circle in the middle of the board that represents your home area. And you have the prisoner in custody, and half of your free band starts the game asleep.
Yep.
And then I have to nominate a home edge which I nominated as the edge from where you are setting up right now. And so I am the attacker. You eventually need to try and get the prisoner off to win. I need to get the prisoner off to win, but I have to get it off what's designated as my home edge. So you cannot go back from whence you're setting up.
Yep. So right now I've got 6 guys awake, 5 guys asleep. So we went rounding down.
Yep.
Most of my heroes are awake, barring the Knight of Barrack. Thinking that guy he needs his beauty sleep.
He's a little annoying, so they like to spend as little time with him as possible.
Yeah, he's really tired from running 17 miles in the last game to get into combat, so he's power napping right now.
Yeah.
And I kind of like equally spaced people out.
Yep.
Now, knowing that I can't take this prisoner off, you allocated the edge that I'm closest to, so as a player. So the right side of the map, the side that so I can't fall back essentially with
Correct.
the prisoner. Yep. And I can't move the prisoner until turn 4.
Right.
Which, keep that in mind, guys. See where this game is at turn 4 and see if I'd wanted to start moving the prisoner at that point. But yes, I'm kind of all set up in that way. Now, is there any surprises about my setup anything you would have thought you would have seen and didn't see?
I was not really. I was a little surprised that the Stalker faced my home edge because he's such a good shooter. But I would have maybe had him facing diagonally to perhaps try and cover as much of the board as he could.
I have to place my models before you pick your home edge.
Yes.
So I don't know. I didn't know it was your home edge.
Yeah.
And then, but that being said, I was worried that you were going to come from all 4 sides at the same time. And if you did, you would have, 2 models, maybe 3 models on a side.
Yeah.
And that Stalker was just to hold the one side, get a couple shots off, maybe get one guy in melee. That's my methodology. It doesn't end up anybody in the backfield, but what you do for your setup is pretty ingenious. If we look at what are you thinking about? Like, what's your methodology when you're setting up your?
When I looked at your setup, I was hoping that I was kind of taking into account too the fact that I had 2 casters that could both summon creatures. So I really just put together what I thought was a really good shock force, which is what I'm putting down right now. So both my Black Spears and the Shadow and my Priestess I bring in from the front. And then I end up also putting my followers there. And so kind of the idea was shock and awe. So rather than take my time coming in, I just charged right out of the gate, hoping to essentially just blow a hole in the front line of that defense. Because you had models spread out like that, you were going to have some blocked charge lanes. So I thought I might be able to engage 2 or 3 models right at the beginning, drop 1 or, potentially 2, and jump out to a quick advantage.
Yeah, I was kind of spread out because I didn't know where you were going to come from. And I had to spend a turn in order to wake the guys up. They either have to have a combat come in close to them where they can then test to wake up, or someone who is awake can spend their action or special action on their turn waking them up. So I know you get to go first turn automatically because you're an attacker, and I'm spending a turn kind of waking everybody up.
Yeah.
So I get up and get a battle line about as ready as I can when that big shock troop that you're setting up right now kind of comes barreling down Main Street. Now, for those of you that may have not seen the other episodes, what makes those 2 Black Spears in the Shadow so good?
So the Black Spear has a very high defense stat and a very high armor stat, which is a little unique. Usually a model will have one or the other. They're very hard to hit, but they don't necessarily have good armor, or they have really good armor, but they're not very hard to hit. Well, this model has both. The model itself carries a very large shield, which accounts for quite a bit of its defense stat. But he's no slouch offensively either because he carries a shield, he can shield bash. So he could get 2 attacks or potentially 3 attacks in the right circumstance if he wants to split his dice. So just the defense and the armor combined make it for just kind of a tough nut to crack.
Yeah.
And then the Shadow has a talent called Flurry, which anytime you get more than one model on a enemy model in melee, its defense drops. Well, the talent Flurry doubles that drop. So suddenly defense 5 becomes defense 3, defense 4 becomes defense 2, which, I mean, when you're rolling, a D6 up to a D12, obviously makes a huge difference on the odds of hitting.
Yeah. And then is there any methodology of the one caster, your leader casters with your SWAT team, but then your other casters kind of off on the flank coming in from the far side?
So the joint casters can essentially use each other as a conduit to cast spells as long as they're within 18 inches of each other and can see each other. And so by putting that one at a 90-degree angle for the way your models were spread out, it allowed me to get some line of sight lanes to as many of your models as possible. And then also I put my Mizrakai there. And so that also allowed for that Mizrakai to have some support if things went poorly for him in a combat.
Gotcha. Yeah. It definitely felt like you had 2 casters against my one. You get, as a spellcaster, you normally get, I don't know if anyone don't, but I would say you normally get 2 counter spells.
Yeah, to my knowledge, every caster gets the opportunity to counterspell twice.
So if I keep both of you within line of sight, I could attempt at least for a little while to keep counterspelling. But even then, I've got 15 power. You've got effectively 30 power between the 2 casters.
Yep.
And I'm spending power on a 1-to-1 rate against you to try and stop both your spells. And then if I want to try and cast any of my own, you could really drain your opponent's caster pretty quickly.
Yeah. And especially in this case, because of your armor penalty.
Yeah.
You're at a slight disadvantage to counterspell already without spending extra power. So it really applies pressure to your caster in particular.
And I think I'm at a very slight model advantage. I think I have 1 model more than you.
I believe so.
But if you're essentially summoning 2 spirits or potentially summoning 2 spirits a turn, that can easily.
So I elected to charge your apprentice knight, which is one of your forward facing the knight closest to me. And I did not have the distance to get there, but you can still declare a charge to a model even if you're not going to make it. And then I would just move my full movement and be in a state of charge. So then if I'm engaged by something else later, I could still reap the benefits of it. So I'm curious, after playing through this scenario, would you have changed anything about this first turn? Because you elected to hold rather than countercharge.
Yeah. I maybe would have evaded. I think looking back at this scenario, knowing I would I would try to get as many people out of the center of the board as possible and let you take the knowing that you have to take the prisoner off one board edge instead of getting flanked by 2 different sides and have a SWAT team coming down the middle. I would have tried to pull everyone back into that back bridge with the stalker and then tried to have him handle some flanks while the line that is made to be a line kind of forms up back there. That being said, I, in this game, tried to form the line up kind of in the midfield around where the prisoner was, thinking at this point in time, I could hold 4 turns. I can get 4 turns, and then what I was going to try and do is pull back towards your table edge anyway with the prisoner, and then skirt to one of the corners and get off the side, right next to your edge.
It is important to note as you're watching this scenario, as the defender, the way that you win is to get the prisoner off any side of the table other than what I, as the attacker, have claimed as my home edge.
Yep.
So if you're watching now, I'm the person who just reached. So I have to get the prisoner off of the opposite edge. The defender can get it off any edge, or for it to be a draw, the prisoner could die.
Yeah. You can't
Now,
kill.
if the prisoner dies, it's impossible for me as the attacker to win.
Yeah. I'm the only one that could. Well, I guess you could like fail a jump into the lava
Right.
or something, but you can't allocate an attack against the
Right.
prisoner. The center of this board is going to get real clustered real quick. But I think we're going into my turn 1 because you've moved everybody, and I am going to just kind of sporadically. I've got 6 guys up, 5 guys down, and I'm going to wake 4 of my guys up. I've got 2 archers, and instead of using any of those archers to pick up that 5th guy, I'm going to just allocate some shots. I want to try and get the flank with the skirmisher and the red archer. I'd like to try and clear that.
Yep.
If I get both of those bodies off the table, then I have an entire flank to try and fall back to, which is even better for me than going backwards and then cutting a corner to try and get away.
Yeah. You can't really see it in the video, but I do have an archer. So my skirmisher is just off the bridge down on the train tracks. And then a little down from the skirmisher, there's an archer just next to the mushroom-like foliage.
Yeah, they can see it in the top right map. There's on the 2 o'clock. There's an archer right next to the foliage. And it would suck to be a prisoner in the middle of a volcano.
It get a little hot.
A bunch of angry, heavy armored knights come down to
I'm sure they smell great.
Yeah, that's all. Well, I'm pretty sure they smell great to begin with. But so at the end of turn 1, all of my guys but 1 are up on their feet.
Yep, they're
ready.
awake.
And I am hoping, beyond all hope, to win initiative for round 2.
Yep.
I need to move first, just so that I could get my choice of charges, or not even
some semblance of a battle line that you desire put together.
And maybe if I take the initiative round 1, then I can charge you while you're on that bridge.
Yep.
I don't think it makes you any worse to get to charge there, or even to meet in the middle, but I definitely don't want you charging me. Now this is a shot, I think, from your red archer.
Yep.
Into the 1 cohort archer I have. Not levy. What's the
muster archer?
Yeah, the adjective man with bow. And you hit and you wound, which will pull that archer. And then, so what is the? You had the archer on the flank. You got good angles of shots from there. Was that always the plan, to just sit on the outside?
Yeah, I thought that you would have a desire to try and have, you had a couple follower archers that you would try and have in that area and take some shots with them. And so my melee fighters probably weren't going to be able to get through the line and get to them. So I just thought if I could have a red archer, it was going to be a, kind of a convoluted area, but maybe leave the red archer on the flank to just have some sort of missile potential. And because she wasn't moving, I need high numbers, but not ridiculous numbers. So that was initiative for the second turn. And I won initiative in the second turn.
Which was big. It was big for this game. Which means you cast first, you move first.
And the casting on this turn was pretty significant because I ended up casting Taunt, or I don't recall the exact name of the spell, but it gives Taunt, the talent Taunt, to my Mizrakai. And what that talent lets me do is make a discipline check, choose a model within 12 inches. They make an enemy model, they make a discipline check, and if they fail, they have to charge me.
Yeah.
So I'm standing and, saying your mother smells of elderberry and, whatever the rest of the line is.
And then you get a bonus to that too, to your discipline roll.
It gives them a +1 die level to the discipline. So the spell goes off. That's what that roll of 5 was for. I think you tried to counterspell here.
Yeah, I think
but we're unsuccessful.
I tried a counterspell, and then failing the counterspell, I cast my own spell, which is a buff on myself.
Yeah.
Because I figure I'm going in, I might as well go in
Go in hot.
hot. Yeah. But it would have been hilarious if you baited the power for the counterspell and the spell on himself and then taunted the archer, the archer follower.
That would have been kind of funny.
Because then the caster, you've wasted so much power of mine.
You just spent 4 power trying to get ready for this fight that never happens.
Yeah. But tying up my caster in combat was a really good plan. It just negates a lot of the counterspell potential. Because with casters in combat, counterspelling now becomes a free hit against you.
Yes.
It's even more deadly. Do you see do you see that it is how Corona plays, that when you have 2 casters, you really just try and alpha strike the opponent's caster to give you that kind of magic superiority on the battlefield?
They don't have any direct attack spells. So everything they do, either buffs their own models or gives a hindrance to the enemy model. Except they can each summon a spirit warrior. One's a spirit archer, one's a spirit warrior. So normally what I'm trying to do with their magic is get to a situation where where numeric superiority makes a big difference on that given turn, and then use those 2 summons. But it certainly doesn't hurt to know that, when played right, I can burn through another caster's magic points.
Gotcha. Because it was interesting too that you taunted the caster. Because even since you can cast spells through each other, you could have taunted my leader into. That was what I was really worried about.
Mm-hmm.
Taunting my leader into your hit squad on the bridge, and then killing my leader.
Well, I thought about your leader, but your leader has a higher discipline. So the likelihood of your leader winning the discipline check was higher.
Okay.
So I thought that really created a situation where, 50-50, the taunt doesn't do anything for me. And taunt really only works if you're the initiative winner, because you're drawing a model into you. So you have to do it before they move. So most times if someone knows you have taunt, they're not just going to leave a model on hold right in front of you because they know, well, that's going to end bad anyway.
Yeah. So I got my spell off for the buff. You rolled the 3 on your taunt.
Yeah, so then I get the discipline check, roll a 3, and I think, oh, great, I did all that to set this up, and now I'm going to blow it.
And then I roll a 2.
And you roll a 2.
And one of the 2 members that would have failed the taunt, and my caster goes in.
Here comes the caster.
Yeah, and he goes into it's the Mizrakai, right?
Mizrakai. So he has to charge the Mizrakai. The Mizrakai counter charges. They meet in the middle, but there was enough distance between them that they each moved at least 3 inches. So they're both in a state of charge.
Yeah. And the Mizrakai has this great hit, backstep kind of.
Yeah, he's a great shock trooper, because on the turn he charges, he gets a talent called Impact, which lets him roll 2 damage dice and pick the higher, so he gets advantage on damage. But then after the combat, he can step back 3 inches. So he sets up a potential charge again, so you can just rinse and repeat with that advantage damage roll.
Yeah, it's really, really nice. I see this opportunity, though, that in order to backstep, you need to be able to move back.
Correct.
And there's this beautiful gap that is just calling my name for a follower archer to jump behind him to try and stop his backstep movement. But until we get there, we haven't got onto my movement yet. But you have your SWAT team now.
Yeah, so at this point, I'm just declaring charges for about anything that you have in that front line.
Okay.
Now, again, I was a little surprised here that when I declared a charge, that none of your knights countercharged. You just let me charge in. So what was your line of thinking?
If I let you come to me, not on that bridge, you have flanks open for followers to come in and join that. If I countercharge, yeah, maybe we both get 3 inches for 1 turn, but then none of my support that just woke up and is in the back can come in and help me for that fight. There is 1 charge that I passed the evade test and you went into or declared a charge against a pikeman, and that pikeman books it and does not want any part of that. Originally, I thought the pikeman might go in support, but since he was target of one of the charges, he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to go against any of your heroes.
So he's thinking, you don't pay me enough to deal with this.
I think you either also redirect into one of my other heroes on the front line, or you continue to the pikeman, in which case my Knight of Barrack will intercept you.
So I made a discipline check. So you can make a discipline that I just rolled the 1 on. So you can make a discipline check. And if you do, you as the charging model can stop where you would have contacted the model. Because I failed it, I had to continue on my course of movement, which, as you said, brought me in proximity to your Knight of Barrack. So he was then able to intercept me. So he stopped me in my tracks. So now the Knight of Barrack has my follower at a disadvantage. So I charged with my second red spear behind the first for 2 reasons. 1, that's going to raise my red spear's defense from 5 to 6 because they're touching each other. And then 2, that gives me a second attack because I have standoff with the spear. So I'll have 2 attacks against your barrack.
Yeah. Definitely is a good move. I really was like hoping the Die Hard would keep me alive for a turn there. And hoping that I have a lot of models kind of in the back that are waking up, trying to get into this fight. And if I can get them onto some of your models and into some of these combats, maybe I break one of the black spears, and then the line starts to crumble when you start getting 1 or 2 of those models out there. And I need to do it relatively quickly because you're already starting to see these flanks coming into play.
Yep.
And getting up into me.
So I was fortunate in the last turn that the stalker rolled really poorly. So this lowly skirmisher was still alive, and he came flying up this ladder with his 8 inches of movement and engaged your muster archer.
Yep. And he did just enough to get there.
Yeah.
Which was big because I think the muster archer was going to go into that fight with the Knight of Barrack and just provide. You wouldn't have been piled on,
right?
But just to provide a little more bodies and one more attack in there.
And the cool thing about the skirmisher and any model with a thrown weapon is that the first turn that they engage in combat, they still get their thrown weapon.
Yeah.
Now, the Shadow could not charge your muster thresher because the wall prevented her from being able to move in a straight line. So at this point, I'm just positioning them to be able to maneuver into combat the next turn, and then possibly, depending on how these few fights go in front, to get that shadow around to take advantage of the flurry talent.
Yeah, which is pretty vital, I think, with the flurry talent getting into people with high defense. You can't really. The armor is a beast of its own that you have some tools to deal with, but being able to go into a guy who's defense 5 and immediately make him defense 3 is pretty darn good. Because then it, as you will see later, it allows you to more reliably break your attacks down at defense 3 into from like D12s to 2D6s, and you're still hitting a little bit better than a 50-50.
Right. Because generally speaking, it is more difficult to wound than it is to hit. So the more opportunities you have to try and wound, the better results you get.
And it's surprisingly a lot when your model gets an attack, splits his attack into 2 dice, and a shield bash for a 3rd dice. It's almost like you have 3 dudes on just belting you. So we're figuring out that I was pointing out the trick I was going to try to do with the archer jumping over. I mean, that was...
He was explaining, I was going to Leroy Jenkins over the lava.
Yeah, it's a really dumb... I mean, I think it was a D6, maybe, and I need like a 5 or a 6 to land it. On 1 through 4, I die because I had fall damage and or lava.
Yeah. So you charge your stalker into the side of my skirmisher.
Yep, the stalker really...
And you engage my shadow with your thresher.
Yep. No, I don't think that I touched the shadow. I think I put all 3 into the black spear.
Oh, yeah, you did. You put all 3 in the black spear.
And then one of the reasons my stalker went into the skirmisher this turn was a spell you cast earlier, which was the -2 dice level RAR on my Stalker. So it doesn't affect his melee capability, but it does debuff him from a shooting standpoint. That, and I've got skirmishers in my backfield. I got models of yours intertwined and in my battle line. It's already turn 2 and things are
they're unraveling.
On fire.
They're unraveling a bit.
Yeah, but Herod really seems to like having your heroes and then your followers supporting your heroes.
Absolutely.
So I think if I could go back in time and position a little better, I may have started in a little bit more cohesive of a sleep pattern. They probably wouldn't have just fallen asleep willy-nilly in a volcano.
So the dice roll you just saw was the skirmisher's throw of his javelin into the archer, which technically happens before hand-to-hand combat. So a big advantage to throwing weapons like that is he rolled exceedingly well. I think I rolled a 19. So it killed the archer before the archer ever gets to fight back.
Yep.
And so now it's just the skirmisher and the stalker. And I apparently used all my dice luck on the first roll because I rolled a 1 on the second.
Yeah. The stalker is also not great in the fact that it rolled very poorly. And I think your skirmisher lives at least to fight on another turn, if not
I believe he did. I think he kept you pinned down for 1 turn.
Yeah. I think more than 1, I believe, because and then we'll see what happens in the future with the movement that comes on. But
so this is the Mizrakai, I believe.
Yeah, into the
caster. So I hit. The caster doesn't have any defensive talents, so I wounded the caster.
Yep. No dodge, no parry.
So then, unfortunately, the caster makes a discipline check because he lost the combat. And as you can see, he failed.
Yep. So I get scared. I lost the combat by one wound, and I run. And being in heavy armor, my speed is 5. I get a D4 added to that, and I roll a 2, I believe.
Yeah.
My D4, so I'm a total of 7 inches away.
So anytime, if you run from a combat before you roll the movement dice, the attacking model, if he's not engaged with any other model, can elect to pursue, which I did. And if you catch the model you're pursuing, regardless of the number of life points they have left, they are dropped.
Yep. So you just stab him in the back.
So I just ran down his caster and dropped him.
Bottom of turn 2. Turn 2. Okay. Yeah. And I now have a Mizrakai
in your backfield.
Yeah.
Unengaged.
Yep. Currently, I still also think on turn 2 I have a guy still sleeping.
Well, he got up.
Oh, he just got up. Yeah. It just got up. So.
But he is still a little bleary-eyed.
Everything is coming uphill, I think I say at this point.
Yeah.
And then so here I think we're finishing up, starting clean up for the turn, and we are rolling.
That might have been a black spear attack because I think we were resolving that.
Oh yeah, you're in the front, and my
sword attack your apprentice knight
is a 1, and then you deal damage to my apprentice knight because the parry fails, and there's a 1 damage there, and I end up losing that combat.
But you made your discipline roll.
No, that's my attack back.
Was it?
Because I think when I do make the discipline roll,
that was your shield bash,
which becomes a 10, and then for the damage in the shield bash, I do not get through. Yep, and that's the 3 for the leadership, the Thresher, 2 for the leadership on the Muster Archer, I believe it's there, and then the leadership for the Apprentice Knight also fails because at one point in time, I had a apprentice knight and an archer running through the center of the battlefield.
Yeah.
Now, this is a unique trait to this mission in that normally you have a home edge that you're running back to. But in this one, my home deployment area is the very center of the board.
Correct.
So when I run, I have to run towards my home area. And I end up for a couple turns kind of just like ping-ponging back because the run distance puts me farther away from the center in the other direction.
Right. So they're panicked in the center of the board, afraid to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the D4s for the added distance of their run. And that's my Apprentice Knight booking it out of that combat.
Yep.
And then the Archer also booking it out of that combat. But the Thresher stayed.
The Thresher held.
Yeah.
Which was big because if the Thresher had run as well, we would have seen the same thing as with your caster. I likely would have pursued and caught your Apprentice Knight.
Yeah, they're taking the other 2 life points off the battlefield as a hero. But it's also, you already got my caster off, which means my ability to heal is gone. You put the 1 wound on the Apprentice Knight, meaning that wound's always going to be there till the end of the game.
And I have 2 casters that I know have free reign because you have no way to counterspell.
Yeah, no counter spells. The only saving grace I have is that the summon spells are difficulty 4, not 2. And I could hope that you roll some low dice rolls. Yeah. Here's my leader, I think, going into a combat.
Now, I have to say, I was impressed with your leader's performance. Because so many models bolted, I was feeling really good about my positioning with your leader. And he certainly held his own.
Yeah, the 2 parries with the D12 is nice. Armor 6 is nice. The Magic Resistance 1 is okay, but I don't think, even out of all 3 games, I don't think Magic Resistance 1 came up once.
No, yeah. And again, part of that is because my casters usually are buffing my models, but there were a couple times, typically if I was trying to cast something on you, I rolled high enough that you're looking at a target number 3 instead of a 2. So,
yeah. So going into this next turn, we're cleaning up these combats. You said you're feeling good. You're feeling strong?
Pretty good.
Yeah, I am feeling the salt levels. Game 1 is starting to feel a lot like game 1 to me.
Yeah.
Where I start feeling the battle lines kind of crumbling. But this time I don't feel like I too terribly out positioned or outplayed myself. So I'm looking for ways that I can still pull out something. I can't move the prisoner till turn 4. We're going into turn 3 now, and I've got no caster. And your red spears are now like running around the battlefield, getting into the muster archers and the other followers in the back.
Yep.
And I don't have even a second line of defense kind of prepared. And even if it was anything that would resemble a second line of defense, I have a Mizrakai in the middle of that ready to tag someone down.
It would be a fair statement to say that your battle line has crumbled at this point.
So I'm looking for ways out. One of these ways out is that one of these combats goes heroically good for me.
Yep.
And I get some of your heroes to run, or maybe one of your casters gets knocked over and breaks and then no longer can be used in the battle. Don't do that. Don't knock over your opponent's models intentionally, but
that might lead to bodily harm. So not a good idea.
And then the other thing I'm secretly reading at this point is the defender, who I currently am, doesn't need the prisoner to live. That the prisoner can die and the game will be a draw.
Correct.
Which I haven't been alive too long, but a draw is better than a loss in my book. So I haven't looked at it. Can I just, at this point in time, I don't do it, but can you just attack the prisoner off the rip?
I don't see any rule that says you cannot, but I also think that immediately means that you cannot win the game.
Well, you could still win if you break your opponent.
So, yeah, you could win if you break your opponent, I guess, as the defender.
Yeah. That seems like a weird kind of clause to be like, okay, I'm going to just off this prisoner and play to break you because I know you can't win.
Yeah.
But interesting. That's why this is a club scenario and not a tournament scenario.
Right.
But,
and that's one of the neat things about Freeblades is it will play very competitively if that is your desire. It is extremely well balanced. There's, I don't know, 18 factions now. They're all balanced really well. The standard scenarios are balanced really well. But when you want to do something more narrative, it handles it exceptionally well. Even to the point of there's a role-playing game that if you want to use the tactical game to resolve combat in the role-playing game, you can kind of jump up and down between the two systems.
Yeah. Here, what's going on with your movement here? So we're in round 3.
Round 3, I think I'm checking here to see if my leader could move and engage one of your models, or I may be checking a distance for a spell.
I think here's where your leader moved in to the Thresher, and then the Black Spear left the Thresher without being able to be attacked because the leader moved in there, and that Black Spear moved into the back line to the other hero. So on my turn, the Knight Apprentice came back.
Yeah, I recall. So I moved the Thresher, allowing the Black Spear to move, and then that also was giving room for my Shadow to move around that front line to base your leader.
Yep. So right now my leader has the Shadow and one of the Black Spears. Which is pretty brutal because his defense is normally high at 5. He's high at 6, but he's got the flurry, right? So he's down to defense 3.
Defense 3.
Eating a ton of dice from the Black Spear, who's shield bashing and splitting attacks. And I've noticed playing against Corona, I deal better if I can make you have to move. Because if you can stand still and then split all your attacks and get your +1 to multiple different dice rolls,
right?
It really compounds to like standing and grinding stationary battle line against you is not the way that this game was going to go my way.
Yeah, that's not the way you want to fight Corona.
And here I'm just asking a couple questions about the back line and some positioning.
So the Black Spear left. The Black Spear was engaged to a model. I moved my leader up to engage the same model, which lets the Black Spear leave that combat without any type of opportunity attack. But because he was engaged at the beginning of the turn, he cannot re-engage with another model. So at this point, he cannot initiate it. So he's just kind of standing out in the open, positioning for next turn. Now, if you had wanted to engage him, you could. Yeah. But he's just standing there growling, trying to look intimidating. So then my Mizrakai engaged your
Knight of
Tanar. I brought my caster up to position him to attempt to free the prisoner.
Yep. You could not free this turn because you had cast.
Because I had cast, yes.
But in all future and subsequent turns, the caster's there to pick up Milady and pull her to safety.
Yes.
I was also very interested. We'll see in future turns the direction in which you pull her. You went straight back towards away in the camera, south on the top-down view. Why that direction?
I was worried that you were going to be able to muddy up or contest her movement if I went straight to my home edge. I felt pretty confident that with the way the combats were going to go, I would have a model or models that could either block your entrance to the path I was taking, so you wouldn't be able to pursue, or aggressively push down the bridge to my home edge to engage you and keep you from being able to, essentially run backward and catch them.
Gotcha. Okay. Because I was worried about that, about you grabbing the prisoner and then running aggressively directly towards your home edge, because with the Mizrakai there and his backstep, and you had so many models that were double teaming, triple teaming some of my models and piling on that could just leave, that you were going to cluster up that back door and sneak the prisoner through. But I still like the idea that we'll see happen where you do pull it back, because I think as soon as you went that way, I lost all idea that I was ever going to follow you in that direction. and I had to go to whatever plan I still had. Here I've got my militia spearman. He's coming in to support the...
Yeah, now this actually, I think this is when you do it. You make a great move here because I believe this turn you move in and engage my red spear. And that allows you to then break your stalker off and only potentially have one free attack against you.
So that is not this turn.
Next turn.
So he's actually goes into support contact with the stalker.
Yep.
And him and the stalker kill one.
Kill the skirmisher,
kill
right?
The skirmisher. And then I still have the 2 red spears there.
Now the skirmisher has a tunic, a sleeveless tunic. So I'm sure it was that you guys were jealous of his biceps.
No, it was the same guy from 2 games ago. And he can't be if I was going to lose this game, that one model could not survive. I would like the Terminator go into this lava with a thumbs up, knowing that this single model is not allowed to survive. But there he goes. I think that's the Stalker's attack.
Yeah.
Into a 17 and a 2 for damage, which was just beautiful.
Right. But because the crit had happened, you start with a full die in your hand. So in truth, the total damage roll was a 10, which again, he's wearing a sleeveless shirt, so his armor value is only 2.
So now we're going into the red spears that are getting their attacks in on
red spear misses.
Now, how much gold is a red spear?
14. Well, 12, and then there are veteran upgrades that give it a Mar boost and the shield mate to give them the defense boost. But for 14 points,
it's not bad. A D8 attack is not bad for
defense
14.
6 if they're touching each other in melee.
Well, so I mean, it's 2024. You can do what you want melee.
They always ask first, may I touch you with my spear?
Why is it so red? And then you've got a 4 into a 4 for the D12s. Those are from the black spears, though, right?
Yeah.
I will withhold comment from the previous statements.
I appreciate that.
But yeah, so the black spear, one of them is currently on my leader with the shadow. The other one is
he is not engaged at this time.
Yeah, he has moved off. And what was your plan with him? He's kind of in the middle of all of my guys.
He was in the middle of it, really looking for attacks of opportunity. I felt like my red spears had, your spearman and your stalker kind of locked up. When my caster freed the prisoner, that gave me a free model to intercept whoever you might try and pursue with.
Okay. And then as we're looking at this, we've got your D4 and D8 from the...
Yeah, so my leader fighting the muster thresher.
That's the 2-ended weapon from the staff. So I noticed also that you always used the staff offensively, never defensively. Is that kind of the trick with...
I do a lot with, many casters have a staff that's 2-ended. And so when you have a 2-ended weapon, you can either use 2 attacks. The first attack is at your full offensive rating. The second attack's -2 die level. Or before combat, you can state you're going to use it to defend, in which case your defense goes up by 1. Most of the time when I have a caster, I'll raise my defense. In the case of the Coronin, because their casters have dodge, I'll usually take the 2 attacks because they have a defense of 5, which is pretty good, especially, when you're talking about a follower fighting them. So usually, I'll trust the dodge to protect them versus the +1 to defense.
Do they have the leader have a slightly better Mar? Or is it still?
No, still D8.
D8 Mar?
Yeah.
That's a little... Well, I guess it's good that you've got a dodge then instead of like a parry is significantly less useful at D8 Mar. And this is my leader getting a good attack off, I believe.
I believe you parried I hit you with a 5.
Yeah.
And then you parried with a 15.
Yep. Which got my riposte.
Right. So if you ever crit a parry roll, which a crit is a 10 over the necessary target number, it gives you bonuses. In the case of a parry, it gives you a riposte. So you got a free attack.
Yep. And I do believe I dealt 1 damage to your black spear.
You did.
On this. And a point to be made here, I can't actually attack the shadow at all in this combat.
Correct.
Because the black spear having protector.
Yeah.
and this caused the dealing the 1 damage to your black spear. You didn't deal any damage to me. You lost the combat, and the shadow, a lot like game 2.
A lot like game 2.
Decided it wasn't worth it and is going to book it. I don't get to follow up because the black spear passes, and the black spear is going to hold me in combat on that bridge to allow the shadow to get away easily.
This gets a little more into the nuance of maneuver, but when you win a melee combat, if there are no more enemies engaged with you, you can reposition your model 3 inches. Where you end up doesn't really impact combat that turn from the standpoint of raising or lowering defense or giving you additional attacks or anything like that. But what it can do is have you engage a model. So sometimes if you feel like you're going to lose a combat or you could potentially break, you can engage a model, and that prevents them from being able to pursue. So that's one of the things you can think about with that reposition.
But we'll see the shadow move here shortly.
I think those D10 attacks there were the Mizrakai and the Knight of Tanar kind of resolving their attack at that end.
Yeah, the Knight of Tanar held out significantly longer than I thought they would. That +1 Mar with the parries really does.
That's a really good model. Yeah. You can really feel secure using the shield bash of that model because it has the 2 parries and it has the 6 armor value.
Yeah, and the parries using that +1 too from the Mar is really, really nice. You could split, with the +1, kind of like your Crohn's too. Yeah. That you get the benefit when you split dice, the +1 to both dice, which is really nice. We're having a fun chat figuring out what's going on.
I'm sure. I can tell by the way my hand's moving. I'm making a very impassioned speech about something.
Yeah. Oh, here's your explaining if you're going to put a spirit down below or put the spirit up above.
So at this point, I freed the prisoner.
Yes. Prisoners out of chains.
Liberated from the evils of Haradellin possession.
So it goes from step 1, free the prisoner. Step 2, get the prisoner off your table edge.
Correct.
Do you have a plan at this point how that's going to happen?
So my hope is run her off the side where I am. It's a little hard to tell from this angle, but that track, the mine track that I'm on, kind of drops as a hill. And so I feel like if I can get her back there in a turn, that makes line of sight more difficult. And again, we've gummed the middle up enough that I don't think you're going to be able to respond quickly enough to have a model run around and intercept me.
Yeah, I don't think when you start running back that direction that I'm going to be able to follow you and stop you physically like with a melee combat. But I am starting to look at what are my options that I still have for taking down this prisoner. Not many. You've killed all of my muster archers. The only ranged combatant I have left is the stalker, and his quarry since the beginning of the game was your leader.
Yeah.
So
now here's where you made a move that made a significant difference, and this was a great move. So you chose to break off with your stalker.
Yes.
And that gave my red spear a free attack, which I missed.
Yep.
So now your stalker's out of combat and free to maneuver in following turns.
Yep. And my militia spearman, who was supporting the stalker, is also free to move. And he will move kind of to plug this hole of getting to the stalker.
Right.
So now I've got my QB in the backfield. He's got the football.
He's got the football.
He's dropped back and he's ready to chuck this Hail Mary.
Yep.
Hopefully in subsequent turns.
The Mizrakai and the Knight of Tanar are engaged, so the front part of this bridge is kind of locked up.
Yeah.
Between the spearmen and that combat.
And then I believe I have priority this turn. So So you haven't moved yet.
Correct.
And even though right now it looks like the stalker would have a great shot, you will end up moving for your turn, and the stalker can't shoot this turn because it's the turn it broke off.
Right.
But then you will potentially move again the next turn. You have 2 moves before the stalker gets its first shot off at you.
Yeah, potentially so.
Here we're still resolving the leader fight.
I think we were also confirming that if you broke off, it prevented you from taking a special action.
Oh, yes. So something important here is that the stalker has quarry, increases the dice level by 2 levels against that one model, and as a special action, I can move quarry from one model to another.
Yes.
Now, I really want to quarry the prisoner. I can maybe get 1 shot off to shoot this prisoner as it's being dragged away, and that extra 2 dice level will help because the prisoner's got 2 life points.
Yep.
Defense 5.
4.
Defense 4. Armor 2.
Armor 2.
2 life points. So if I'm only get 1 shot, I got to make a crit in order to get both life points off. Not easy to do.
The very end of that previous turn, my priestess finally killed that muster thresher. And what I'm trying to figure out now, it's the casting phase. I'm trying to figure out when you summon a creature or a spirit, it can't be within 6 inches of an enemy model.
Yeah.
But it has to be within 6 inches of my model. And so what I was trying to figure out is I could see below this track, and I could have cast it down there, and spirit models ignore terrain modifiers. So she could have climbed right up the hill. And what I'm trying to figure out is, can I summon the spirit and position it in a way to block line of sight for you to shoot at this model?
Yeah.
But I come to the conclusion, because of you deciding to use the quarry, that I was going to take the chance to, hopefully this hill is going to block the line of sight. And then rather than cast and summon a model, I don't recall what spell I cast.
I think you tried to hex me, but then you ended up rolling that 1.
Yeah, I think I charged my...
Yeah. Which I figured that I was going to try to get quarry off before I took the shot anyway. So I wasn't super worried about the hex coming in. It would have just further solidified the fact that quarry is better on this turn if I was hexed. But yeah, we're checking line of sights for potential shots off on this, because the race is on right now. Can Rodger break me, kill more models before I kill the prisoner, or get the prisoner off? Or do I get a shot off to try and kill this prisoner that's being dragged away?
Yeah. And when I'm checking that line of sight, again, what's kind of unique about the Corona is when you want to cast a spell on an enemy model, you have to have line of sight to them. For my priestess to your stalker, I don't believe I did, but the magic users for Corona can use each other as a conduit for their magic and bounce their spells off the other model. So I could check and see, do I have line of sight to my other caster? Does he have line of sight to your stalker? Yes. So then I can try and bounce that spell through him.
Yeah. Which is great, because I tried also that combat that's going on between the Tanar Knight and your Mizrakai. I tried to use it as a shield from the magic, but it's hard to do all your trigonometry and Phalon while you have 2 sets of eyes trying to hide from, and then one of those sets of eyes you're trying to actively shoot.
Right.
And while all this mess is going on with the stalker trying to get a shot off, what are the fights looking like in the middle of the field? We've got my leader against the Black Spear and the Shadow still. We have 2 red spears against Sword of Phalar, or a Phalar swordsman.
Phalar swordsman. And I believe I doubled up and attacked the apprentice, or the Knight of Tanar.
Yes. And I've hit a point where I believe I'm 1 model away from...
I engage my leader into your muster archer.
Yep. And I still have the muster archer, and I still have the pikemen.
Yeah.
Who have been just running back and forth.
And then the red spear moves around to engage. And then what I'm asking here is, so anytime you haven't moved a model yet, or if you've elected to put a model on hold, if an enemy model moves within 4 inches of you, you have an opportunity to react to it. So whenever you make a move, you want to declare what you're doing And then your opponent has the opportunity to say, well, I'm going to intercept that, or I'll let you do that, or I want to countercharge. So I'm stating I'm going to do this with my red spear and finding out of Brandon, if you wanted to take some action to affect that.
Yeah, and I did not at all. I wanted to just keep that spearman standing in the hole, and he's going to hold the door and just
hold the door.
Yeah, he's going to just be a lineman for me. And you have your red archer.
Yeah, at this point, there's enough scrum going on that I've realized, okay, I'm not going to get any more shots with my bow. She's not doing any good out there, so she started running down these tracks to, get up onto the platform to be of some use.
Yeah, I think everybody on that platform's in some sort of melee combat at this point. And then you have your caster who's dragging the prisoner, moving back.
She's happily following.
Happily following?
I'm not dragging anybody.
Oh, well, happily checking ranges. I don't think I have line of sight. That little hill that you were kind of talking about before where the track goes down. I'm looking behind the dwarf statue through the hill, like just the barely top of a model's head, and it's very good at blocking line of sight. Now, here I think that I'm going to potentially run the stalker backwards, but then Rodger graciously tells me, like, I know you can't change your quarry if you run, so I end up just opting to maneuver backwards 7 inches, giving him more space and hopefully more time to react and change his quarry on this turn from your leader to the prisoner.
Yeah. That roll of 3 was your pikeman finally coming out of panic.
Yeah. So he panicked 4 times,
I believe
3 times
so.
in a row.
Yeah.
And just stood there. So, like, interesting enough, is it just that you were being a nice guy that you didn't even have like one of the red spears run over and just kind of,
it really, with the model panicked like that, and the fact that I was already in possession of the princess, I could have attempted to kill models, but I really didn't feel like that helped me accomplish the objective quicker. So when I'm playing the game, I'm trying to win by objective as opposed to just breaking you. And I want to get the princess off the board. So because he's panicked, I've got your other models tied up. I've got some free models. One thing that did kind of go sideways is I never imagined, I think your muster archer lasted 2 turns against my leader, which, going into that combat, you really think I'm going to kill this model in the first turn because she's got 2 attacks. So that was the 1 and the 1 I rolled.
Yep.
And so, if need be, I could have used my leader on the pikeman the next turn, but I'm mainly thinking I want to push south with my models to deal with your spearman and your stalker. So the guys up above that, I don't really care about at this point.
Gotcha. Okay. See, I don't know, because you knew the quarreler was or the stalker was back there, and that was going to be my only shot. But these combats, is that something that when you go into list building or you go into playing a game, you're playing to win by objective because it's more points and better off than winning by break? Are there any tactics or list considerations you make that are tailored towards that, or do you find you'll take models that are more defensive because you don't want to break the people?
I certainly think about maneuver more than I did when I originally played. So there are some scenarios where you need to be able to get around the board quickly. So if you're just picking good fighters or just picking strong defensive models, you're going to be at a disadvantage in some scenarios because you just can't get your models where you need them when you need them. So when I'm putting together a list, I try and think of the different scenarios that could potentially come up in a tournament and ask myself, how am I going to win this scenario? So if it's domination, how am I going to hold 3 points on the board? Or frontier, how am I going to hold 3 points on the board? Or if it's advanced guard, how am I going to get to those objectives across the board quickly so I can test on those research points. And then I try and have as many answers to those questions in my list as I can. Now, depending on the goal total of the tournament, sometimes you just can't answer all those questions.
Yeah.
So it's like, what are most likely to happen? But definitely maneuver is one that I think some beginning players don't think about.
Yeah. Yeah. So in your current list with the Cronins, is that what the skirmisher is really there for?
Skirmisher gives them some maneuver. We kind of knew what scenario we were coming into, so I wasn't as concerned about maneuver with this scenario because, I knew it was going to be centrally located. So with this scenario, it was more about, how can I have some models that have some staying power to hold and some models that could break a hole in a line. Mm. So by this turn, I think I've been beating on your leader about 3 turns in a row.
Yeah.
And he is just not cracking.
No, he's down 1 wound.
Yeah,
but you haven't been able to do the second or the third one yet. And that Shadow has run, scared, turned around, gotten back into combat, and is gone back and forth. He did hold a lot better than I thought he would. And I think we're the first wound on the Knight of Tanar and the combat with the Mizrakai in the back. And always be bashing with that shield bash.
Always be bashing.
Do you see a point? When would you not shield bash?
Maybe if I'm piled on to discourage people from splitting dice. I've got 2 parries. So where it would be concerning to me is if it drops my defense to the point that you might split a dice to have 3 attacks or 4 attacks that are going to reliably hit. I want to try and maybe keep that shield to make you only roll 2 dice instead of 4 so that I can counter them with my parries.
Is the shield bash? The shield bash is just minus
minus
die
2
level.
Die level.
Okay, but it still scales with your if
with
you get
your
a
mar.
buff or whatever.
Correct. Yep. So one of my favorite combinations, well, it's not with a shield bash, but it's kind of a similar scenario in that 2-ended weapons. Mm-hmm. So a model, well, you can see it with your questing knight or your questing knight of Tanar would be a great model to buff with Tanar's blessing.
Yeah.
Because suddenly you've got, your attack at a D14 and your shield bash at a D10.
Yep. And then you could break those up and still get the +1s on multiple.
Yep.
Can you break up a shield bash? Can you split?
I would want to confirm that with the rules guys, but I don't see why not. I mean, if it's an attack like any other. So I think that was, again, me trying to beat on your leader and it coming to no avail.
And then here is...
those are my 2 spear attacks.
Then you have your shadow coming in after this.
Yeah. And you parried. And I actually think this may be where the shadow breaks because you did a wound to my black spear.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So that the black spear was there past its leadership, and here's where the shadow breaks.
So anyway, that was, 3 or 4 turns where I'm just hammering that leader, and he will not.
So
thank you, sir. May I have another?
Your shadow has a plethora of different options on that weapon.
She does.
Other than pin, is there anything else that would have helped you?
Well, I used a special action and I changed it to deadly at one point. So that allows her to crit on a threshold of 8 rather than 10. I was hoping that would go off at some point because your defense was dropping to 3, but there's not. It does some fun stuff, but what I find Weaponeer more advantageous about is it can help manipulate a turn order or like discipline order for combat because she can use disrupt. She can use, if she charges and she gets to go first in combat, she can use pin, which would daze the model before it gets to act. But because we were standing in combat, deadly and lethal are probably the 2 go-tos that I use on Weaponeer.
Gotcha. And then you could do that action to change it and still attack that turn.
Yeah. A special action keeps you from making a ranged attack or casting a spell, or I guess the opposite. If you cast a spell, you can't do a special action, but you can still do a melee attack and do a special action.
Gotcha. So here we're...
So at this point, I summoned a spirit warrior with my moon priest, who has the prisoner in contact.
And that spirit warrior's on the bridge there.
Yeah, I did that to make sure that you weren't going to chase me with any model.
Yeah, just the second line of kind of insurance defense.
And then I try here to cast, I think I tried to cast Hex on your leader and gacked my casting roll, if I remember correctly. Now, it was a higher number because, again, I didn't kill the model that I was in combat with. So my caster has Spell Dancer, so I can still cast while I'm fighting, and I don't give you an opportunity attack, but it is -4 to the die roll.
Yeah, and then -5 with the magic resistance.
Yeah, so suffice to say a 2 wasn't going to get it done.
Yeah, no. And did you catch, I think you won priority on this one.
I believe so.
It's hard to tell since my caster's been dead for so very long that
I don't even remember you having a caster. It's been so long.
I barely remember his existence to begin with either. I'd like to think that after game 1, when he pushed so many of the followers off that cliff, they just pushed him into the lava.
Yeah. Tanar's revenge.
Yeah.
So I charge with my black spear. I'm thinking here, man, if I can make short work of this spearman, which the black spear should, then maybe that'll let me deal with this stalker out here.
Yeah. And in my head, when you made that charge, and you now have I am 1 wound away from breaking, and you have all of my followers in combat, and all of my heroes other than the one stalker in combat. This was the do or die turn.
Do or die turn.
Because not all of those followers are statistically making it. Statistically, none of those followers are making it, and this is going to be the last round, and I was going to break.
So your pikeman that had just recovered, I charged with the spirit warrior.
Yep, and they meet in the middle. Now, that doesn't seem like the worst fight in the world for the pikeman, even though it's just a spirit warrior. But
yeah, I could see why you charge, because it gives you the impact, which lets you have advantage for damage. I wasn't sure if you would, because that also... You would have gotten standoff because of your pike, so you could have gone first instead of it being simultaneous. But I was kind of hoping you would, because that freed up my charge lane for my red spear to charge your leader. Now, he could have maneuvered and gotten into combat anyway, but being able to go first is kind of nice.
Yeah.
My shadow did much better than the previous game and recovered on her first check.
Now, part of the reason I also countercharged there is because I was worried that the red spear wasn't going to maneuver into the leader. I thought he was going to maneuver into the pikeman, thinking that, because I'm always in this mentality that he's going to just break me and get the win.
Yep.
And if I countercharge, I'm not piled on. And then not being piled on with that unwieldy weapon means that I'm not defense like this turn.
I get that. So I... At this point, got sick of horsing around with your muster archer and just broke off with my leader.
Yeah.
You got an opportunity attack, which you missed.
Just a D4 looking for 5, defense 5.
Yep.
Yeah. It isn't nothing, but it isn't great. 25% chance you get something. I think here we're discussing that you moved the prisoner in a manner that I could just barely see.
Yeah.
And I was confirming that yes, the quarreler can barely see its quarry over in the corner of the field.
Yeah. So I was really hoping, we've got some foliage over there, and I was really hoping that there was enough movement with the prisoner to get onto the other side of it to block line of sight. But in fact, she's just short.
Yeah.
And so she's concealed. I had cast, she had nimble, so I'm doing anything I can to try and...
Yeah, so you're +2 defense.
Right, to try and improve her defense. So the concealment gives her +1, the nimble gives her +1, so her defense has gone from 4 to 6.
Yeah.
And then you've got some range penalties. So I'm hoping, okay, even if he does hit, maybe we get away with 1 wound. And then I can deal with him after my black spear turns this spearman into pink mist.
Yeah. So I do end up, I believe, with only the -2 because the sniper gets rid of the concealment.
Yep.
But I take 1 for range penalty, and I do take 1 from the nimble defense. Oh, I mean, +1 defense, -1 to
Right.
shooting. It's kind of all in wash, but
It sounds the same, but it can sometimes impact whether or not a critical hit happens.
yeah, yes, it can. Yes, because the +1 to defense becomes multiplicative, right? Because every level of crit afterward has to take into account the +1
Right,
defense, whereas
correct.
the +1 hit doesn't. And here's the big moment.
Here's the big moment.
So I have a D16 with Quarry, and that first dice there is a 16,
Yes.
spiking the shot, and then into a 5, making it a 21. Even with all the modifiers, I make the shot, I make the hit, and with 1 level of critical.
With 1 level of critical. So you start with a full die
An 8.
and an 8 and 5, armor value 4. I'm sorry, armor value 2.
There's a 13, which is the crit I needed.
Yep.
The arrow finds purchase and takes the prisoner out.
So prisoner's dead, gets dropped, which creates a scenario where the best case scenario is that I can draw.
Yes, because if the prisoner is not alive, then there's no end game scenario for you right now where you could win this
Right.
game.
So now my forces are in a frenzy.
Yeah.
You know, this hope for their nation just took an arrow through the eye.
Yep. Which for a bunch of hillbilly farmers wearing heavy armor, not knowing that this savior to your country existed 2 games ago, fail miserably in putting a map together, but find a door pretty quickly.
Right.
For it all to end with a single arrow in the eye.
Single arrow through the eye.
Yeah, I guess written on that arrow shaft was "to whom it may concern," and then the ending of this game is you mop up.
Yeah.
I think 2 or all 3 of my followers.
I clean up
breaking
some
me.
followers here. I think I just rolled. Yeah, I rolled an 18
Yeah.
to attack.
The spirit ends up destroying my
Slaughtered the pikeman.
my militia spearman dies to your Mizrakai, and the muster archer is eaten by the black spear that moved over to eat him up.
And I still don't know if my leader killed your muster archer. I don't think she did.
I don't.
So pikeman goes away.
And at this point, with just the pikeman, I am equal wounds on the board and wounds off the board. Well, what was your? Well, this cleans up. And what was your impressions of the whole 3 game?
So I think this is a fun game. The campaign was nice. You know, it's, again, one of the neat things about Freeblades is how easily it fits with a narrative because there are so many scenarios that you can play, so many different ways to, you know, determine victory in a game aside from, hey, let's line up and kill each other. And so it's nice to have, you know, a more narrative feel to, you know, a war game you can play. And it really brings into focus a lot of the different talents and abilities that on the surface you may think, I don't know how effective that will be, but, you know, you can kind of find synergy to it and find some ways that it can help in scenarios where in just straight combat, maybe it doesn't.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It is, you know, this is a testament to, you know, early in this game, aside from the combat between your leader and the Black Spear and the Shadow, you know, things were really turning on you.
Yeah.
But this is a game where if you continue to make good moves or well thought out moves, you can salvage, you know, a draw or a win at times where in some other games when things start to go south like that, it just cascades and it's all over.
Yeah. I know a couple games out there that it can go south before you get your first turn.
Right.
It kind of just is over. But yeah. And then if anybody's interested in getting into Freeblades or playing like this, where can they go?
So certainly the DGS DGSgames.com website is a great resource. There's a very active Discord community called, I think the Discord channel is World of Phelan.
Yeah.
So World of Phelan on Discord. Certainly the Freeblades players Facebook page, it's super friendly bunch. The game's great, but in all honesty, this is the best game community I've ever been a part of. It's just great player base. Certainly there are players that like to compete to win, but it's not unusual in big tournaments to find somebody who played a demo a couple days before and they just threw their army together at the last minute because they want to play in a tournament. And you have somebody who's really friendly that they're playing against that helps teach them about the game while they're in the tourney. So go to one of those places, ask questions. There's questers around the country that can maybe get you in a demo game, but don't be shy. We'd love to help you kick the tires.
Cool. And that was game 3. Thanks for watching, guys. That gives you a little bit of a taste of what short, somewhat modified, dumbed down campaign could look like in Freeblades. If you'd like to see more Freeblades content, please check some of the others in the playlist. They'll be showing up in the bottom corners of the screen and clickable. And if you're interested in getting into Freeblades, go to dgs.com, dgsgames.com.
dgsgames.com.
Oh my gosh, Julie's going to just beat me with a stick at Adepticon. But dgsgames.com and come see.
Very active Discord channel. If you attend Adepticon, we're going to have a full slate of demos at Adepticon, so you can find me at the tables.
Cool.
Or Brandon at the booth.
Well, as always, champions, never stop playing.